Hey, what's going on, everybody? AJ Shulo here, going to give you guys a free main event breakdown for UFC Fight Nights, Gastelum versus Cannonier. Before we get into the breakdown, I would like to let you guys know that AJMMABetting.com is sponsored by PrizePicks. PrizePicks, the most straightforward fantasy game on the market. Super thrilled to be working with them. You could use promo code AJMMA to receive 100% instant deposit bonus for up to $100 on your deposit. So PrizePicks, it's just you versus the site. Very simple. Super thrilled to be working with them. So it's a very good opportunity. Actually administered my UFC free prop picks for PrizePicks for this upcoming Saturday. You could get those on the mailing list. I actually sent those out a couple days ago, so the lines might still not be there. But regardless, I had those rolling out every single UFC week. And then I have Bellator, PFL, and Contender Series PrizePicks props behind a paywall. So you get some free and you get some paid content for me as it pertains to PrizePicks. So again, PrizePicks, check them out. It's an awesome site. Super thrilled to be working with them. We got a main event, though, to break down, and this is a very compelling fight. Certainly, there's a lot of other important fights taking place at this weight class within the UFC over the next few months. We've got Gastelum versus Cannonier, obviously. We've also got Paulo Costa taking on Marvin Vettori. And we've also got Darren Till taking on Derek Brunson. So you got three key middleweight fights. And, of course, you've got allegedly Robert Whittaker is going to rematch Israel Adesanya taking place. And what could easily be, one or two fights away. I think the winner of this fight could easily face the winner of the Costa Vettori fight or the Till Brunson fight. So very, very high implications here with this bout. And it's an intriguing stylistic matchup. Getting into things to start off, Kelvin Gastelum, I say this a lot with his fights. He's actually should be fighting at welterweight. He's a guy that's just a little bit, from a length perspective, just undersized for this weight class, but he is skilled, as we'll get into. And as a result, he's been able to compete with the upper echelon fighters. But, not that I would expect him to be champion at welterweight. There's certainly a lot of fighters that could give him trouble there, like Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, fighters like that. The elite could certainly give him a lot of trouble, and I would favor them to beat him. However, I think that from a general perspective, he would have much more success at welterweight than he would at middleweight, in part because of the physicality factor that he has to deal with against these fighters. Lucky for him, there aren't a ton of great wrestlers in this weight class, but there are times where getting taken down, getting controlled, just like the Chris Weidman fights, even the last fight against Rob Whittaker, where that is, somewhat of his detriment in fights. And so he gets out-muscled, he gets, out-strengthened on the ground, and then he loses, just like the Weidman fight where he got submitted there on the ground despite holding a BJJ black belt. So that is my concern with Gastelum, kind of just in general, is the size at middleweights. But again, and also just the fact that I've overrated him in the past. If you look at a lot of his wins at 185, it's to come against guys who are near the end of their run, right? Against Nate Marquardt, Tim Kennedy, Jacare Souza, Michael Bisping, right? Like, these are guys that are seemingly near the end of their career. And it's no disrespect to those guys. Those are great wins on paper, but in terms of like Gastelum proving himself as like a top 5 guy in this weight class, beyond those wins and beyond being competitive with Israel Adesanya and even winning some rounds there, I'd like to see a little bit more consistency out of him before I say with conviction that he truly is a top 5 fighter, because pretty much in his last fight against Whittaker, he was outclassed from bell to bell. I thought he'd be a lot more competitive there. Whittaker just proved he's a better striker, did a very good job of fighting him at range, just sticking and moving, just landing much more volume. Like, as I mentioned before, taking Gastelum down 4 times, doing some control time. It almost seemed to catch Gastelum off guard, as if he didn't prepare for Whittaker taking him down. But regardless, it wasn't exactly a great performance by Gastelum. It's not to say it was a bad performance by Whittaker. It was actually a very good performance by Whittaker. But that fight sort of solidified the fact that Gastelum isn't like truly a title contender quite yet. He is still 29. I mean, he's well into his career in terms of fight years. This is coming in on 20 fights here in the UFC. But at 29 years of age, excuse me, training at a good camp in King's MMA, which features fighters like Marvin Vettori, Beneil Dariush, others as well, that could spell, improvements for Gastelum down the line. Although I do think that he is pretty much what we've known him for this whole time. He's a very good boxer. He closes distance rather well. I like the way he feints, closes distance with his jab, sets up his left hand a lot. He's a southpaw striker. Doesn't stand super heavy on his lead leg, which I like for him here in this matchup against Cannonier, who will throw low kicks. He has a lot of power in his hands as Gastelum. He has fast hands. And he's ultra durable. He's never been knocked out in his pro career. He's faced some dangerous strikers in there. He faced Robert Whitaker. He faced Ronaldo Jacare Souza. He faced Israel Adesanya, right? So he's certainly proven his chin. It's certainly proven that his chin is good. It's not that he can't be hurt or can't be knocked out, but it's just generally he's a very difficult guy to earn a knockout against. His defense isn't ideal. He doesn't do the best job moving his head off the center line, but he does move it a little bit. I actually think that Cannonier's got the better head movement of the two. But mainly Gastelum, despite coming from a wrestling background, he does mix in takedowns from time to time. He also has Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, could scramble reasonably well, though he does give up his back to work back up. His main success as a UFC level fighter has come through forcing pocket exchanges, closing the distance, and doing damage with his hands on the inside. He's got good technique. He throws some kicks. He'll kick you low. Sometimes he'll kick high into the body occasionally, but for the most part, it's his pocket boxing that does most damage, and that's how he wins fights. Cannonier, on the other hand, he's actually been in the best form of his career here since moving down to middleweight. This is a much more appropriate weight class for him. He was fighting at light heavyweight and heavyweight in the past. You could just tell much more in his frame. He just is a lot more ripped, and the build that he carries is much more suitable for, say, 185 than it is at the upper weight classes. Has a very immense amount of power in his hands. He's been able to hurt some guys that are historically shown to be durable, like David Branch, Jack Hermanson as well. He even hurt Rob Whitaker there in round 3. Granted, he went on to lose that fight, but he still, hurt Whitaker in that fight nonetheless. So he definitely carries an immense amount of power in his hands, but he's also a good technical striker. And in addition to having about a 6-inch reach advantage over Gastelum here, I do think he throws straight punches a bit better. I just think he's a bit cleaner and more polished with his technique. As we've seen the last couple of fights, he's got very damaging low kicks. He throws them hard and often, and he'll, go to them at distance. Those are his main weapons. Low kicks, kind of similar to Gastelum. Low kicks, his boxing, very good from range. He's very precise. He's got power. And then he'll occasionally go to the body with a traditional body kick and also a front kick as well. But for the most part, it's his boxing and his low kicks is what does the most damage for Cannonier. As touched on before, he is the more defensively sound striker, I'd say, in terms of blocking with his arms and moving his head off the center line. But on the flip side here, Gastelum actually has the durability edge. Not that Cannonier is undurable or that, he's just impenetrable or anything like that, but he has been hurt a couple times in the past. He got knocked out at heavyweight by Sean Jordan. He's also been hurt in other fights as well. Just his last fight against Robert Whitaker, got rocked badly there. Granted, he recovered, went on to fight through it, went to a decision there. He was also hurt by Jan Blachowicz at light heavyweight, but now that he's moving down at middleweight, he's not facing his guys that carry as immense amount of power, say those guys at light heavyweight and heavyweight do. So I think that both guys have generally good durability, but I give a slight edge to Gastelum just because he's been hurt less. Now, Cannonier's got more punching power of the two, but again, with Cannonier's durability edge, that might mean theoretically that Gastelum's got more finishing upside of the two, and that would be my lean, because anytime something's got to give, whether it's like a guy getting knocked out for the first time or somebody's power just not coming through for the knockout in a scenario where you're facing a guy who hasn't been stopped via strikes before, I tend to think that the durability prevails. So while Cannonier can knock Gastelum out, it's a possibility. I don't think it's the most likely outcome given the track record that we have on Kelvin Gastelum here, right? So at range, I think it should be Cannonier who's landing the low kicks. Again, he won't have as much success landing them as, say, he did against Anderson Silva, more flat-footed guys. But even against a guy who's moving around bouncing constantly like Robert Whitaker, he still did have some success landing it, even though Rob doesn't stand super heavy on his lead leg at all times. Gastelum, same deal. Doesn't stand super heavy on his lead leg, actually brings it up at a pretty often rate. Cannonier should still have some success landing those kicks. And again, Cannonier is a longer fighter. He has about a 6-inch reach advantage. And I just think his straight punches are more technical. So he should have the advantage at range. And it'll kind of be on Gastelum here to close the distance intelligently without taking enough damage, force the pocket exchanges, and then try and either knock Cannonier out or just do enough damage on the inside to win rounds with consistency. I don't think either guy's got a lot of takedown upside here. It would be Gastelum that would, in theory, just based on the fact that he's the more experienced wrestler, he's the guy more willing to go for takedowns. But as touched on before, he is more so content to be a striker these days. He's gone for takedowns more in his last couple of fights. He did it a lot against Ian Heinisch, but Cannonier, to his credit, he used to have bad takedown defense and bad ability to scramble off of his back. It's actually improved a lot through the years. He actually does a very good job of defending takedowns and scrambling back up when he does get taken down. It's very difficult to take him down and control him, even if you have back control on him, just like Rob Whittaker and Jack Hermansson did. And those guys are very good grapplers. So I find it tough to believe if Jack nor Rob could do anything from back mount while Cannonier was a bit compromised, especially against Whittaker, then I don't think Gastelum will. So while Gastelum has more takedown upside of the two, I think that the fight will be won or lost in the striking department, where, again, I do favor Cannonier from a stylistic perspective. However, I do have some concerns about him. As I mentioned with Gastelum, he's 29 years of age, but on the flip side, we've got Cannonier, who's 37 years of age. And while he hasn't looked regressed in any of his fights, 37 is still, historically speaking, seemingly near the end of a fighter's run. Cannonier's not super old in fight years. He hasn't been fighting for forever. He doesn't even have more than 20 pro fights on his resume. But the age combined with the injuries that he sustained these last couple fights, torn pectoral muscle from the Jack Hermansson fight, and then he's coming off a fight against Robert Whittaker where he broke his arm. So again, he listening to him in interviews, he's saying that he's actually a much improved version of himself despite the injuries. He seems rejuvenated, ready to go. He says that he doesn't really miss a beat, wants to just stay amongst the elite guys. He says that while Gastelum maybe wouldn't have been the first guy that he chose out of the list of the top contenders, he's very happy to take a guy like Gastelum who has solidified himself amongst the upper echelon fighters in this weight class. Guy who's fought Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker as well. So it seems like Cannonier's got all the motivation there, and it's encouraging to hear him say that he's improved of all things despite all this the injuries and the layoff. But it still does give me some pause nonetheless for him. He is going to still be my prediction to win, because if you guys have been following me for a while, I always think that the skill level of the fighters, how they match up stylistically, is the most compelling aspect when analyzing a fight. I think that people overreact greatly to all this other noise that goes on in the backgrounds, weigh-ins, interviews. Well, it's stuff I look at and stuff I take note of. I do not think it's nearly as compelling as what we see on tape, what the fighters show us with our own eyes, because that is stuff that is not deceiving. That is stuff that is factually true. Whereas it's very difficult to look at a fighter on a scale and quantify exactly how they will perform based on how they look. Because we've seen fighters time and time again go on a scale and look bad, and then they actually go perform in the octagon, and then they go out there and win by first round knockout, right? There's obviously cases where it goes the other way, but there's no way for me to quantify exactly looking at a fighter and say on a scale and going, yep, they look this way on a scale, therefore they're going to perform this sort of way in the octagon. I always think that the tape, what you do for your homework in terms of research analysis, that is the most compelling element when analyzing a fight. So prediction is going to be Jared Cannonier to win, but I do think that Gastelum is a very live underdog. I think this fight's competitive, even though Cannonier does have several advantages here. I don't think they're by wide margins. So thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you guys so much for listening to me. Again, partnered up with PrizePicks. I'm super thrilled to be working with them. AJMMABetting.com is my website. I can be found on Twitter at AJMMABetting, Instagram, same handle. YouTube, that is the same name channel as well, AJMMABetting. Good luck on all your contests, guys. Please feel free to hit the like button and subscribe button on this channel, and take care.